Welcome back to CBSN. I'm David Begnaud at CBS News headquarters in New York. We have gotten word from our team in Colorado that the jury debating whether or not James Holmes will live or die has made a decision, and they're ready to announce it. That will be done at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We will have live coverage of that event when it takes place. It will be life or death for James Holmes. Randy Zelin is an attorney here in New York joining us on the phone. Randy, how long has the jury been deliberating whether or not they were going to sign the death warrant or send him to prison for the rest of his life?
I believe that they went out. It's got to be 18, 20 some odd hours. I mean, I can't pinpoint it for certain, but certainly, and I think that's been the whole debate, which is, for a lot of people, what has taken them so long, perhaps.
Well, what does that tell you? What does that tell you? The fact that they've come back with one. I'm thinking more in the case of it's only taken them 20 hours. So
well,
what does that tell you?
You know something? I don't know that it tells you anything, and here's why. On the one hand, an argument could be made that when you are asked to play the role of God, because many people have said that only God determines who shall live and who shall die. When jurors are asked to be put in the position of making that determination, I don't care how serious, how horrifying
have you been able to visit
the crimes are, that juror is going to deliberate, because you can't unscramble that egg once you decide that someone's permanent lights are going to be shut off. So 18, 20, I don't care how long it takes, a juror has to live with that for the rest of his or her life. So I don't blame that juror for taking that amount of time, whatever amount of time it might be, to determine who lives and who dies.
James Holmes killed 12 people, and he wounded 70 others 3 years ago when he walked into a movie theater. It was at midnight, and it was packed for the screening of the film Batman, and he opened fire. 9 women and 3 men have been deliberating whether or not they're going to send him to the death chamber. Randy, would you agree with me in saying that you can instruct jurors as much as you want? You can tell them what the rules are. You can tell them how they should come down based on what. But at the end of the day, they're going to vote with their heart.
There is no question about that. It is called jury nullification, which is when jurors say, listen, I don't care. I'm going to do what will allow me to sleep at night. Because if I go to the flip side of the coin that I started talking about a moment earlier, on the other hand, first of all, we're not a society of an eye for an eye. That's number one. We are a society of laws where many people are opposed to the death penalty on the simple grounds of we don't believe in an eye for an eye. Killing this person is not going to bring anyone back that he killed. Is that really appropriate closure for people? And then, of course, in this particular case, you have the somewhat unique circumstances of whether or not this man was suffering from a mental disease or defect, irrespective of the jury's rejection of an insanity defense. Do you kill someone whom, whether you believe as a matter of law or not that they were insane or suffering from some mental disease or defect, should that person be treated as the same as someone who just has no insides? Now, perhaps the jury may have already concluded that this man has no insides and deserves to die, but part of that deliberation and part of that process has to be, once again, before I punch someone's lights out, before God determines that, am I really, 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 really doing the right thing?
Talking about the right thing, I remember James Holmes' mother sitting on the stand, and you see there this tape that we're playing. This is not live. This is looking into the courtroom. But I remember her sitting on the jury stand, and I remember her tearfully telling one of the attorneys who was questioning her, if only that psychologist who called me would have told me what my son told her. Because she claims she didn't know what he was going through emotionally and mentally. She had no clue because he didn't tell her. And so here's this mother on the stand, put on the stand for the sole reason of trying to save her son's life. And I remember her saying to this attorney, It could have changed everything if only she would have told me, because I would have driven to Colorado. How much does a mother on the stand pleading for her son's life like that impact jurors?
I think that it does. And when we talk about reasonable doubt, and that really is more of a term of art for the actual trial, but that notion of what if, only if, that notion of, do I have enough information to make a very, very important decision? If I have enough information, I don't have a reasonable doubt. If I need more information, then I have a reasonable doubt. So I would respectfully submit that a mother getting on that stand, yes, you could discount it because what mother wouldn't say anything to save her child's life? But when you add to that, if only I knew, that might cause pause for thought. Now, there is one other argument to be made in this case, which is giving Mr. Holmes the death sentence is actually an easier way out for him. And having him languish in jail for the rest of his life without the possibility of coming out except feet first might just be a much more horrifying and a much more difficult existence than just simply ending his life.
You know, it's worth noting that within the last 2.5 weeks, while this jury was determining his fate and while they were deliberating whether or not they were going to allow him to live or die, there were 2 events inside movie theaters. One in Lafayette, Louisiana, where a mentally ill man walked in and opened fire before taking his own life. And then in Nashville, Tennessee, just this week, where another man said to be severely mentally ill walked into a theater in the suburb of Nashville and attacked 2 women with a hatchet, pepper sprayed them, and then was shot dead by a SWAT team. All of this happening in a movie theater. And I have to tell you, Randy, there have been a lot of people who have come up to me as I was on the scene of both of those in Louisiana and Nashville who have said, based on what's happened here and based on what happened in Colorado, I just don't feel comfortable going to a movie theater anymore. And I don't feel comfortable with my kids going either.
Absolutely. But there is another very startling result of these 2 other incidents, which is, does deterrence mean anything? These people who would go and commit almost copycat, horrific acts in the face of knowing or having every reason to know that there is another man facing the death penalty for having done the same thing, they go and do it anyway? So the argument against the death penalty is really bolstered to some degree, which is deterrence. If the notion of the death penalty is to have a deterrent effect, clearly it doesn't.
Okay, but let me ask you this. The only people who are going to decide Holmes' fate are the 9 women and 3 men. Have they been able to watch coverage over the last 2 weeks and know about what happened in Louisiana and Nashville?
My understanding is the answer is no, and my understanding is also that there was some level of instruction given by the court to the jurors, because certainly that's got to sway a juror. Now, which way it sways, again, I'm not sure. On the other hand, it could enrage a juror even more and perhaps make it easier to justify the death penalty. But the flip side of that coin is a juror could say, as I just said, which is, what is the point? Because it certainly can't be to send a message to the next person that you better not do this or you're going to die too, which is, again, a big part of the rationale, the rationalization, the justification for the death penalty, that deterrent effect.
The jury came back with a question. Do we know what that question was, Randy?
I don't know what the question is off the top of my head.
What does it tell you? What does it tell you when a jury comes back with a question?
Certainly, it shows you would like to think it shows you that they're paying attention, that they're being circumspect, that they're being careful, that they're being deliberate. Sometimes it means that they're not paying attention, depending on the nature and the quality of the question that's been posed.
We are awaiting a decision from the jury. It is going to come down at 7 p.m. Eastern. That is when we're told it will be read in Aurora, Colorado. We have a team on the ground and, of course, a team here in New York as we stand by to find out, will James Holmes, the man who walked into that movie theater and killed 12 people, will he live or will he die?